Hello, welcome back to Madrona's Pulse Teachings. I am Iris J, and we are doing our astrology of the week ahead. We are talking about November 24th through to November 30th. So it's our last week of November. Next week, we'll be talking about welcoming you to the last month of 2025. What a whirlwind. And we are in strong water, fire energy, which is why I'm going with this backdrop. It's getting a little too chilly to film out here, but I thought maybe you get a little bits and glimmers of the ocean amidst all that sun diffusing light. And then we're welcoming kind of that literal fire and water energy, because that is what we're working with this week, okay? Now, there is some amazing fire water. There is some amazing witchy goodness going on in Sagittarius, because Mars is heading into a conjunction with Juno and Hekate, our asteroids, divine feminine, and Black Moon Lilith starts the week out talking with all of them as well, true Black Moon Lilith. And so that is just some lovely fiery energy that's kind of building all week, and then we're going to end in this beautiful conjunction of Mars, Hekate, and Juno. Okay. That's the end of the week. I will talk about that. But we have quite a few rhythm shifts. We start the week out with Venus conjunct Mercury retrograde. We're going to see Saturn stationed direct at 25 degrees of Pisces. And we're going to end the week out with Mercury making its move direct at 20 degrees of Scorpio. Okay, so right away, we know that there are rhythm changes coming, especially that Saturn. That Saturn stationing direct is big, so I will chat with you about that a bit. And let's kind of go through a linear day by day, but I'm going to hold the Sag, Mars, Hecate, Juno until the end. And so we're going to be linear and non-linear, because that's how Iris rolls. Okay, because that's how life rolls. Okay, let's start with, as we come into this week, we have the conjunction of Mercury retrograde and Venus. That's happening at 22 degrees of Scorpio. We are in the water energy, folks. Okay, Venus is approaching her exact trine with Jupiter retrograde in Cancer. And then that will, on the 26th, it will be with Saturn. Okay, so this is important because we've been talking about water trine for weeks. And yet each week we come into a different archetypal resonance of that water trine working with us. And we start the week out, this conjunction between Mercury retrograde and Venus is actually quite lovely. Remembering that with all the water energy, we need to be more yin. The sun in Sag, Mars in Sag, they want to carry us forward. And we are simultaneously moving forward and honoring the yin water energy. That said, on the 24th, as we open this week, we also have Mars square the nodes, okay? And I really like feeling into that as a liminal pause for that Mars who wants to expand, imagine, explore, dream up what it wants to learn, dream up what it wants to study, dream up what it wants to teach, all of it, and as it squares the nodes beginning this week, there's a little bit of a pause. And that is happening as Mercury retrograde is conjunct Venus. Venus is coming through, and she's kind of doing these gentle waves after the deep dives that we had in the Scorpio season. And remembering that Venus is divine feminine love. She's the archetype of your values. Okay, and so here a beautiful reflection is, how do you root into your values right now? What have the last few weeks been for you? What has November and the end of October been for you? And how has that churned up a little bit more awareness of your values? Venus is literally, this is what's important to me, so I spend my money on it. That is not important to me, so I don't spend my money on it. That thing I'm not spending my money on might be $2, but it really might not. That thing I'm spending my money on might be $60, but it so aligns. And when we start shifting even just our spending habits to truly align with our embodied values rather than what we've been taught or conditioned or are trying to prove, and sometimes we think we're trying to prove it to so-and-so, but we're really trying to prove it to a version of ourselves that appropriated so-and-so into ourselves, and it gets so messy. But you know who loves that internal mess? Scorpio. And Venus comes, and there is some insight into what values really honor love for you. Intimacy with life, with your passions, with, of course, other human beings, but especially the intimacies that are, your vulnerability, meeting someone else's vulnerability, when we're not stuck in any cycle of power over ourselves and with others, and where we kind of, a lot of times in those power over cycles, we're switching back and forth, and there's a lot of words for that, but when we're working with astrology, we don't need those words so much as what the archetype is yearning for and how it's fear-driven. And when Scorpio is fear-driven, it does try to control through emotions because it is terrified. Scorpio can be a terrified energy. But we have had so much illumination, deep dives into the alchemy of your own wounds, histories, healings of intimacy that Venus comes. And this is about those gentle waves, the divine love. Who do you want to spend time with? How do you want to spend your own time diving into your own spiritual depths? And Mercury, of course, brings in understanding that would not come if Mercury wasn't retrograde. Okay, so again, always honoring when you're getting redirected. This is our last week of Mercury retrograde, and when you're being redirected from where you thought you were heading in your day, maybe it's our life, but we could just be talking about little things in our day. How is that redirection actually something that brings you into an experience, a reflection, an insight that would not have happened if you hadn't been redirected? Okay, so we're starting out, and then Venus moves ahead, and then she comes into her on the 25th, 26th, she trines Jupiter retrograde. She trines a Saturn who's about to station direct. Okay, and then Saturn's still going to make its station direct in a trine with Venus. Okay, now that Saturn direct happens on the 27th, and the fact that Saturn is stationing direct as it's trining Venus, this Saturn stationing direct is huge. Archetypally, it's huge for the journey that you have been in the Saturn and Neptune story that is very much still in process. This is a shift. And so after Saturn stations direct, we begin to structure a little bit more actively with ultimately your spiritual path, and that active dissolving that literally has death energy in it, that whether that is literal death or metaphorical or is ending cycles, deep cycles. These are the last few degrees of the zodiac that Saturn's moving through. Also that we can come in to the February rebirth of Saturn and Neptune, which is whole new cycles for us individually, collectively. And as Saturn is stationing direct this week, on the one hand, that grief could absolutely still be rising, and yet Venus is bringing her love song into it. But it's love that's coming from the depths of your own being. Also really leaning into the relationships, the intimacies, the emotional intimacies, and that can be with a human, that can also be in your own spiritual meditative practice, it can be in your journaling, it can be in your walking in nature, it can be in your cuddling with your animal companion, leaning into the intimacies that soothe you, that sing to you, that are kind of like a lullaby, is really going to just be beautiful supporting as that Saturn stations direct. But that's a rhythm shift. And that is a rhythm shift in the structures of the psyche. Now, Someone's like, what's the structures of the psyche even mean, Iris? Well, that means something different for all of us. On the one hand, it depends on your chart. But what it absolutely means is something that the conditioned mind cannot understand, cannot grasp. So we really don't need to spend all that much time trying to understand the heck out of it. Because this is deeper than the mind. This is in the oceanic being of your life and how your life ripples into the connective tissue of all that is. And it is deep and it is a lot and it is shifting. And this is the water trine. Okay. And then a few days after that, Mercury stations direct on the 30th. So again, remembering that when we have these shifts, usually the days before, the days after, we're kind of readjusting. And this is water readjusting. So moods could be not so stable. Emotions could be shifting and rising. Grief could be surging. Sudden illuminating insights and reveries could be coming. Dreams could be especially active, maybe even a little confusing, but also illuminating. Remembering that dream work is really working with the watery ways of being when we don't try and make it too literal. When we bring ourselves into the language of symbol and synchronicity and work with it in poetry and art and music and movement, that type of dream work is really, if you're someone that does dream work or is curious about it, that's beautiful for right now. But also knowing that the dreamy archetypes, the dreamscapes are active right now. Okay, moods could be shifting. We could be a little irritable in our intimacies as that Mercury is stationing retrograde. If that's happening, watching the projection outward and really kind of being honest, do I need some time alone? Do I need to go journal? Do I need to go for a sacred car ride and sing my heart out and then maybe start crying and then laughing and then come home and then have this conversation? Taking that time is really, really important, especially in water energy, especially when rhythms are shifting. Okay, so that is going to bring us through. And then on the 30th of November, so 29th, Mercury stations direct. I might have said the 30th. The dates are all blending. 29th, Mercury stations direct, if I said the 30th. The 30th, Venus comes into Sagittarius, okay? But that means that as the 29th and 30th come at the end of the week, Venus is opposite Uranus. At the final degree of Scorpio, she's opposite that Uranus retrograde. Radical awakenings of our scorpionic deep dive embodiments of how we are shifting our values for this last beautiful taste of Uranus in Taurus. This is allowing, especially that Uranus is in Taurus, you know, during this deep water energy that we're having at the close of 2025, it is really just, it's unblocking. You know, it's unblocking emotional blocks that then take up residence in the body and they keep us kind of stuck. Uranus is allowing us to blast that open, to make giant leaps in how we relate intimately, how we honor our values in our life, how we build a self-assured presence where that self-worth doesn't come from anything outside of us, but it comes from our felt belonging to life, to our body. Those are some of the ways that Taurus is shifting right now, and it's all in line with Scorpio. And so we end the week with Venus opposite that Uranus, really, really just singing a beautiful love song of self-love for yourself. Okay, so ending the week with that, knowing that that can happen while Mercury is stationing direct. You can sing that self-love song for yourself. And then, of course, Venus is also trining Neptune, just takes it into higher octaves of that self-love, you know, and then she'll move into Sagittarius and she'll next week come into her sextile with Pluto in opposition with Sedna, because that's what happens when you move into Sagittarius now. Okay, so that's kind of carrying us through that water energy of the week. Fire. Okay, so as I said, we start the week out as we're in that water trine, as we're in that conjunction of Mercury and Venus. We have Mars at 14 degrees of Sagittarius square the nodes of fate. Now, that south node, recalling, is in Virgo. That north node is in Pisces. This is really important and lovely for Mars to pause, because Mars can be very excited in Sag, and it can just want to shoot all the arrows and go chase them into the horizons of meaning making. And there's beautiful passion in there. Now, one thing is to remember that all of that meaning making does not disconnect from what's been going on in the Scorpio, from the water, in the water trine. It is all related. It is all interweaving. This is a Sag who wants and needs to focus its expansion of understanding, meaning, learning in relation to what has been coming up in your depths. Maybe that is a deep dive in depth psychology or evolutionary astrology or whatever your thing is. Maybe it is signing up for some course or buying that book that has been calling to you and you haven't been letting yourself buy because those values, that's Venus, right? Sometimes we'll spend our money on this thing that we don't really want and we actually don't even need, and we won't spend our money on that thing that our heart just wants because somewhere along the line we've been taught that that's not what we're supposed to want. Okay, those are the types of values and spending habits that Venus, but especially Uranus and Taurus, is wanting to reprogram, okay? Because it matters. It really does matter, especially in terms of embodiment. And so with this Sag and that energy of what you're looking at and learning, it has to be coming out of the depths that you've been flowing through, okay? Now, the beauty of Sag is that it is optimistic and it is fire, and it is such a gift to move into that, energy of Mars and Sag with all this water energy, because it helps us have some buoyancy, here and in my posts. If you're new, I do daily posts both in the community tab here and then also on Instagram. And Instagram, I do some stories too, because stories are kind of fun, especially with my animals. So if you're on Instagram, you can follow me there. It's linked. Why did I start talking about Instagram? Yes, because floaties. Because we've been mentioning the floaties amidst all this water energy, and the Sag energy of what you want to learn, how you want to do it, letting yourself learn literally for the sake of just learning, unlearning some of those kind of conditionings around school and education. Yes, the professor is saying, unlearn it all. Has its place, especially in social structures, but we are talking about unlearning, especially as we mature throughout life, like just claiming that spirit, because that's a floaty. Letting yourself get passionate about what is expanding your horizons, that's a floaty amidst the water energy. And we start the week off with the square to the nodes, which says, is my Mars trying to go in order to control something? Because if it is, that's what we've done so much clearing with Virgo. Remember our Virgo season? We are trying to let those habits of control go because they're not going to serve us in what is emerging. We're leaning in to Pisces, which is the ocean, which is the unknown, which is your soul singing in the unknown, connecting to all that is, in which you can see in the dark. You can know the path, but not with the conditioned mind. And so Mars, it's a moment to let go of anything that's sneaking in that kind of forward moving energy, that forward planning energy that is coming from those habits of control. And they run deep. Okay, they're still going to be there even once the South Node moves out of Virgo, but hopefully we have lessened them somewhat. And we really just want to move forward into that unknown, into that which is helping us rediscover ourselves. Rediscover, here it comes, a Mars about to conjunct Hekate and Juno. Okay, so this is midweek to the end of the week. And actually, the energy's here as we begin the week. But especially in the beginning of the week, true Black Moon Lilith is moving from 17 degrees of Sag to 14. She's going to conjunct Mars. She's close to Juno and Hekate as we start out. Then she's going to move further back. And then Mars and Hekate and Juno are just going to come into their exact conjunction, all three of them, for the 30th and then into the 1st of December. And so all week, from 14 to 19 degrees of Sag, we have this energy of Juno, who had such, even I just started talking about Juno, and I'm like, oh, she went through it in Scorpio. She had quite the journey. And she shed so much, i.e., you shed so much about what it means to show up in a committed relationship, whether that's with a partner or a friend or with yourself. Juno is all of it. It is not just the one place that we're kind of taught to go, which is that committed partnership or marriage. Yes, that is Juno, but there's so many other relationships that are so important, that we show up with integrity, sometimes more important in our soul journey. And she wants us to show up with integrity that is reclaiming Hekate, who's traditionally thought of as our first witch. Using that word, we need to also be very mindful that that's a reclaimed witch, okay? And, okay, parenthesis, because there's a lot of comments that pop up when I use adjectives, witchy ways, which I am speaking to all genders. We can be any gender. We are any gender, and reclaiming our witchy ways. We can say that and acknowledge that the history of the witch trials were a persecution against women, 80 to 85%, and even often the men who were also accused were usually related to women who had been accused, okay? And I am deep in my history studies and writing and imagine and meditation, so I need to keep this parenthesis short. But this is a reclaiming for all of us. And if you do carry what we generally refer to as a witch wound, what many of us do, which has to do with our own relationship with our spirituality and earth-based wisdom, as it absolutely intersects structural ideologies and systemic representations and reperpetuations of power over, rooted in this instance in patriarchy, okay, as in the witch trials, as it intersected Christianity. This is all an ongoing reclaiming, and the astrology is just popping for the reclaiming and the healing, okay? And this is for all of us. Close parenthesis. And Hekate is there, and she is part of how we find our way. She's part of how we find our way in the dark, how we find our way at crossroads, how we know and trust an intuition that is connected to all the elements, to the ways of knowing that were and continue to be silenced, but we are reclaiming and owning within ourselves. And that wants to join with Juno into how and who and what we're showing up with integrity with. How stoking those fires of, sorry, I'm becoming aware that my glasses are in their go dark mode, and I apologize for that. I just need to see, of how we want to commit firstly, to what you're passionate about. Yes, to humans. Yes, to relationships. Yes, especially to the relationships that help heal your witch wound, your own spirituality, that help you connect to a passion that might be disruptive to especially mainstream power control systems that have been normalized into so much and are not seen and are actually just reperpetuated through the media in so many different ways. This is just, Mars comes and the energy just, wants to be so passionate about the healing and the reclaiming through shooting those arrows into what you want to go towards, into your passion projects, into how that wants to integrate into what you're reading or writing or learning or drawing or moving with or connecting in community with. And it's all strong and passionate. And we move into that, midweek into the end of the week and then into the first few days of December. Okay, so what do you know? It's another week with a lot. But we are moving through it. Rhythms are changing, especially with that Saturn. And I will see you soon. Be well.